So thanks for inviting me. As I say, I'm Emily Spurrell. I'm a councillor in Liverpool, and I also used to be the Deputy Police and Crime Commissioner for Merseyside. So obviously, there was a lot of issues that came up while I was doing that role, but one of the things that I took a particular interest in was around Brexit and the impact it would have on security. Now, we've had a rather exciting week around Brexit, it's fair to say. I think every week there's some other drama to try and deal with our democratic deficit, among other things. But one of the things that I feel very strongly about is that actually I think the impact of security and policing was completely missing from any of the debates that we had about Brexit and leaving the EU. And it's something that I like to talk about because I think most people probably have no idea. People here might have prior knowledge of this already, but when I speak to people, they don't have any knowledge of it at all. And I think it's important that we get that out there so people understand what leaving the EU actually means. And I think one of the ways that the whole debate was kind of characterised and the way the Leave campaign kind of portrayed, and actually what we're seeing now with Boris with his, Leave be damned kind of approach, is actually we're very committed somehow to this isolationist approach now. And actually, if we're going to try and tackle serious and organised crime, human trafficking, financial crime, terrorism, all of those big issues, they operate on an international footprint. They do not see borders the way that we do. So this idea of trying to take back control really is only going to make it easier for people to get in and out of our country. And it just makes it much harder for us to tackle what people are doing on a much wider footprint than just the UK, for example. So a lot of people have said, well, actually, if we get a deal, you can negotiate all of these things and get all these agreements back in. But again, I think a lot of people don't realise we're talking about thousands of agreements that let you share data, that let you share intelligence, that let you use their systems to try and look for people and use their cameras and their vehicle registration systems, all of that kind of stuff. And then you've got all your legislation around moving people from one country to the next to face justice, either coming from the UK or going the other way. And actually all of that requires legislation, lots and lots of detailed legislation that actually you can't just produce in one single deal. And so I think it's really important that when we talk about Brexit and we talk about the impact of it, there is a lot more to be done once you leave, which I'm sure everyone in the room will be very familiar with. And I think as well, we've talked a lot about no deal. I understand, obviously, with where we are at the minute, that actually stopping a no deal has been the focus. But actually, I think any deal, any form of leaving the EU is going to have an impact, and it's important that we all acknowledge that. So there's a couple of, if I just give you some examples of some of the agencies that we're talking about, and again, some of you may be familiar with these or you'll have heard some of them before, but I'll just highlight some examples when we talk about security and agency cooperation. So you've got organisations like Europol and Eurojust, so they work together in terms of a policing response, but also then the justice side of it. So how do you then actually bring people to justice once you've identified them? So that's where you'll see things like the European arrest warrant, which is a really crucial tool, which allows the UK to export people back to their country. You put a call out for someone who is an offender that you're looking for, if they're found in a European country, they can be shipped back here to face justice, and vice versa. And actually the UK is a much higher exporter to European countries. So I think the UK sent about 1,000 people a year over to the EU, whereas we only have 100 come back from the EU to face justice here. So actually we are very much a contributor. I don't know why they like to come to Britain, but they seem to. So we're very much a contributor in terms of moving people back over to Europe. And actually, there was something interesting when the whole Brexit debate was happening and the referendum was going on, or post that, the government was saying what they wanted something that would allow them to surrender suspected and convicted persons efficiently and expeditiously, which I just found really frustrating because we already have that, and it's the European arrest warrant. So we're trying to kind of reinvent the wheel with things that already exist, and what we need to be doing is saying how do we make sure we keep hold of those tools so that we can allow the police to do their job. There's also a system called the European Passenger Names Records Database. They like their long titles in the EU. And actually, again, this is another crucial one just for literally tracking where people are. It's not about trying to spy on people, but it's just about knowing, who's going into what country. And actually, that is easier for us to share. So if they're moving around Europe, we have a stronger ability to identify where people are. This is particularly useful when we talk about things like trafficking, human trafficking, which is a huge form of modern slavery that goes on that I think we have really scratched the surface of in terms of the seriousness of the problem. And obviously terrorists as well. We know that terrorists will use that system to get around. And so not being able to access that means it's much harder for us to know when these people are going to be entering in the UK and be able to potentially offer a threat to citizens here. You've got something called the PRUM agreement. This is basically the agreement that allows us to share DNA and fingerprints and things like vehicle registration number plates. So if we know if we're looking for someone, we can put that information onto the system, and the PRUM agreement allows us to find those people and identify where their fingerprints might be spotted, so we can put a picture together and find the people that we're looking for. And then we also have something called SIS2, which was in the news quite a lot a few months ago. Yvette Cooper was talking about this quite a lot in the Home Affairs Select Committee, and that's the Schengen Information System. And again, this is a really useful tool, and this is what police officers will use to check to find out intelligence on people they're looking for. So in 2017, there were 539 million times it was checked by police officers. 539 million times, which is huge. And if you imagine if that just goes, that all of that information is gone. All of that, they just don't cease to exist anymore. And actually, it also sends alerts directly to the police. So as well as the police being able to check it independently, they get more than 10,000 alerts every year. And that's for things like missing sex offenders, missing people, vulnerable people who we know might be out there somewhere. That allows us to try and know if they've been found somewhere and get them back home safely. So those are kind of some of the formal agreements and things that are in place, but there are lots of other, I think, informal powers as well that I think Brexit and leaving the EU will have an impact on. Particularly when you think about things like financial crime and things like Bitcoin. So there are lots of these kind of banking institutions and these online systems that criminals will use to fund their operation, to fund their organised crime. And actually you need to be able to have those relationships and those agreements in place to be able to access records, to be able to get them to intervene on your behalf, if you want to try and find out and look at a pattern of money that's being transferred. And actually if we leave, again, that becomes much harder. The argument for them to share that information is a much tougher sell. So there's lots of things, I think, in terms of legislation and lots of challenges around what's going to happen when we leave Brexit. In terms of how we can keep accessing the data and the intelligence that we use to secure the country. There's also some other challenges around that in terms of we already have a very struggling kind of police force. We have security agencies that are already struggling with the funding cuts, and obviously police here will have priorities around keeping our streets safe as well as the wider serious organised crime that operates internationally. And actually what we're seeing is that actually you're looking at police officers, the work that they might do is going to take 2 to 3 hours longer on average than it does currently. So actually that's 2 to 3 hours that they could be out in the streets, that they could be looking into something else, and actually all of that time will add up and have a massive impact on their ability to do the job. There's also another side, and this is kind of one of the final points that I'll finish on. There's another side of Brexit, I think, that hasn't quite been, it has been talked about, I think, a bit more than the previous point. But again, I don't think the seriousness of it has been adequately talked about. And that's around actually Brexit will increase demand for police, not because we don't have the tools, but because it will create more crime. For example, around the rise in far-right tensions and hate crimes that we've already seen since the referendum. And actually the head of counter-terrorism for the UK says that he is very concerned that we're going to see a big sharp rise in this. So actually police forces are already trying to prep whenever D-Day happens, whenever we leave, whether it's a deal or no deal, they're already prepping to try and get police officers ready for an increase in hate crime, but also public order offences. If we start to see medicine shortages or food shortages, the police are then going to be called on to try and manage the situation. And actually they're already stretched to the brim as it is. So all of these things are going to add a huge burden to the police and other agencies. And I think we have to recognise, I think, what the impact of the Leave campaign was on that, in terms of the terminology that it used and in terms of the language that it used, that kind of, I think, has very much created a very nasty atmosphere, which unfortunately is going to create a big demand on police as well. So, to be honest, that was just a kind of a brief idea, really. I'm not by any means an expert. These are just kind of things that I've picked up that, as I say, I don't think we've talked about enough in terms of the impact of Brexit. And I think my big fear is that actually we just don't know about it, and we're still discovering things every day about the real impact of what Brexit's going to be. So that's why I personally, support people's vote. I think we should get this information out there and make sure people know that there is an opportunity to. I mean, obviously, I'd like to just remain in the belief, but aside from that, I think we have to make sure that people have a fuller understanding of the impact of these things like security. Thanks.